Our guest tonight is John Sumple. John, thank you so much for being here and talking about this interesting gentleman, family, and your work.
My pleasure.
So I got a couple of questions for you that the listeners sent in. You want to go over a couple of them?
Sure.
Okay. It says these are all from our friend Red over in the UK. He sent these all through for you. It says, John, what was the general vibe that you and your film crew got from Stan's immediate neighbors? Were they hostile to Stan's presence, and were they witnesses to some of the strange happenings as well?
Well, during the course of from 2000 to 2012, which was really the time period that we focused on, he'd started out living in Denver, then lived in Nebraska, then to Colorado Springs, then back up to north of Denver, where he's currently living in Loveland, in two different locations there. So he's moved around quite a bit. But we did have a chance to go to where he lived in Colorado Springs and the location, obviously, where he lives now in Loveland, and talk to some of the people. And the neighbors all loved him. They understood. And it's not like Stan was running around telling people, hey, I'm having all these crazy experiences, I'm being abducted. He didn't promote it at all, but you kind of know that the activity is going on around you, and even some of his neighbors, they looked out for him. Right. So there were some that kept their distance, but there was never anybody, based on the people that we talked to and the conversations that we had, that were anything more than support of what he was going through. And his most recent video, I know that I think it's on his website, and it was on definitely on YouTube. He captured a video back in September, I believe, of a light going down from the sky into the woods off in the distance to the west from where he lives. And he's outside with a night vision camera, and he's running around calling his neighbors out. And they're all coming out, and you could hear it in his voice when you watch the video that he's hyperventilating. He's all not panicked, but just really excited that something's happening, and he's calling people out, and they're all coming out. You see, there's people all around him, so he's definitely not viewed as a freak neighbor by any means. They have. Again, like I said earlier, their open door policy, friends and family come in and out of the house as they please. They decorate their house up big for Halloween and for Christmas, so they're very good neighbors and members of the community, and I've never experienced anything but positive feedback. But there have been some neighbors that have had some experiences as a result of being around him. There was something that happened a little over a year and a half ago, that one of the neighbors saw something, and Stan relayed it. She was open to talking to us, but bailed when we were there. But she's a God-fearing woman, and what she saw freaked her out. She thought she saw something in Stan's backyard, and wasn't sure what it was, but she was pretty freaked out by it. Let's say that.
It seems like there's just so many strange things that happen around him. Another question for you was, this is from somebody who saw your film. It says, John always said that he wanted to remain detached from Stan's case, neutral, just doing it from a filmmaker's perspective. But, and I think you answered this question, but did he end up believing, in part at least, to Stan's story? And I would assume that through the things you saw, you'd have to be a believer to make the film.
Sure, and that's one of the things that I will talk about too. Is that I had experiences when I was younger. I saw 3 different times I saw UFOs, and one of them I was sitting with a friend on my front porch. It was Devil's Night. I was, I think, about 11 or 12 years old, and there was a disc-shaped lit object that had red, white, and green lights on the bottom half of the saucer, like I guess if you would call it a saucer shape, but the bottom half of that saucer, and it just vertically went down in the woods, only about 500 yards from where I was sitting. So it wasn't like it was way off in the distance, a little speck of light that was moving. This was, I could see it. My friend that was sitting with me, I looked at him and I said, "Did you just see that?" And he's like, "Yeah, I saw that." He says, "What do you think that is?" I said, "I don't know, but could you think it was a UFO? And he said, that's what I was thinking. And we got up and we ran we had some other friends that were walking around the neighborhood, and we ran to see if they saw it, and they didn't. But I remember that vividly. And there was also the two other times that I saw it. My dad had actually called the family outside. One of them he was grilling, and another one he was working in the yard. It was both times in the summer, and I think it was a couple of years apart. But these were the lights off in the distance that went from like east to west on the horizon, like a super high speed. So stationary from point A to point Z in a second or two across, and just stop on a dime. And it did it like 3 or 4 times. Both times they were in different areas of the sky, but both times it was similar situations where there was significant movement across the horizon in a very short amount of time, and like I said, stopping and starting, stopping on a dime and moving, accelerating immediately at a high rate of speed. And one of those 2 times, there were phone calls to the local police department where I grew up, hundreds of phone calls of people who saw the same thing. And the explanation that came out a couple of days later was that it was due to atmospheric conditions, and it was runway lights at Kennedy Airport, it's like 75, 80 miles away. So we weren't buying that. But so I'd seen things. I'm predisposed to it. I'm not a skeptic to the idea that there's something else out there. I think we're very negligent if we start to say that we are the superior entities in the universe. I have a tendency to share stories whenever people bring that up, in the sense that we live on a planet where we're still classifying species,
right?
That we've never seen before. So it continues to happen here. Why can't we extrapolate that to our solar system, and then from our solar system to our galaxy, and from our galaxy to the universe, to say that every time you go out, there's more there? So why would we believe that we're all alone? Why would we even have that conversation? And the other part that I talk with people about is, thousands of years ago, long before Columbus, thousands of years ago, people thought that the world was flat.
Right.
But that was common knowledge based on what they knew at that time. And then in the 1400s, people thought that the Earth was the center of the solar system. Or not the solar system, but center of our everything revolved around the Earth. And then when Galileo was talking about it being, we're a solar-centric solar system, it was about the sun being the center. He was jailed for that belief and ridiculed for that belief. But, and at that time frame, everybody probably thought the same thing. They were like, this guy's nuts. He's a fringe. He's way out there to think that that's the way things are. And then it's later proven that that's true. So are we really that far advanced to think that couldn't apply to us today when it pertains to the idea that there's something else out there other than us? Right. So when I think about that, I think we're really giving ourselves, one, way too much credit to think that we're the only ones out there. And 2, we're being too close-minded because all we know is what we know. According to some of the equations, if you really look at the equations that Stan had, they're talking about space-time travel, about bending space-time. We're linear. We think of things as that there's no way that we can go from point A to point B because it would take light years to get there. Well, what if you could, if you took a piece of string and pulled it taut, and it was, you were arm's length, from fingertip to fingertip, it was a straight line. But what if you then took those 2 points and brought those 2 points right in front of your eye? All of a sudden, it's still the same distance, but if you could bend that, all of a sudden, it's the same distance when it's stretched out. It's hard to visualize this when it's on a phone call, but the whole idea of bending to the 2 points to a point where they're very close together. Also interdimensional travel, which we can't even begin to comprehend because we don't think that way. We don't expose ourselves to the possibility that there's another way to experience travel. So those are the type of things that, which is one of the big premises in the film, and that we ask the question at the very end is, what if this is all true? And what I want, if I could have one wish for anyone and everyone that watches the film, whether you're a believer, whether you're a debunker, whether you're undecided, is that let's just ask the question. Let's not argue points of view that it's right or that it's wrong, but what if this is all true? What if everything that Stan has experienced, and what if he is sharing, and what if the information and the message that he's presenting is something that is true? Let's have that conversation. Let's not talk about the reasons why it can't be true. Let's talk about it being true, because I think there will be a lot more awareness created and ideas, spurred from that type of a conversation versus digging your heels and defending your position. So that's one of the reasons why the film was made the way that it was to reach a wide audience. The only people who we've had any negative feedback from, of the ones that I'm aware of, are people who thought that the film was it wasn't enough about Stan's evidence. Although, if you've seen it, there's 27 minutes in the first act of nothing but evidence. But there were a few hardcore Stan fans who wanted more, and my response to that is, we've shared everything that there is. There's nothing left in the closet. The big stories are all out there. There's no smoking gun that's left behind. So we presented the story that is the big events that have happened in his life that will hopefully get people to go on that journey of discovery and asking themselves the what-if questions.
Why do you think, after spending time with him and doing this film, why do you think that Stan is the chosen one? Is there something special about Stan? Was he just an ordinary guy that got caught up in things? I mean, I've kind of, I have not read his books, but I've had the opportunity to, like say, interview him and Lisa both, pretty lengthy, and I know he doesn't have an answer. Do you have an answer? Do you have any feelings on why it may be him?
I had a conversation with him about 2 months ago. And he was saying that based on a lot of the things that he's now been going through, the stress that he's been going through has been, in some ways, even more debilitating than it's ever been. And I can imagine, he's under a pressure cooker anyway, and then to have the allegations against him only heighten that. But he was saying that he's starting to connect through this stress that he's having in these episodes and these panic attacks to things that go deeper into his past. And he said he's starting to recall things, and he wanted to have more regressions done. He said, because I'm starting to remember things, and he said it's like they're percolating up to the top, and I don't know what this all means. So he said he's starting to connect to things from his childhood. And specifically, he was saying that he's having some memories of when he was really young of being in a kind of like a nursery. Mm-hmm. And he said that when he first started having these recollections, he shared it with his sister, who's older than him, and she said she has the same recollections of being very young and in this nursery with a bunch of other people. He said it's kind of like a very empty white room and these metal cribs or bassinets type of things. He said those were some of the things were started to come with a bunch of other kids. And he said he did have a memory of a whole bunch of military people coming to the house when his parents weren't there one night. His sister was babysitting, and when they came to the house, there was people that came through the front door. He says, I remember all these people coming in. He said, my sister, instead of staying there, she either left the house or ran and hid. And he said, I felt they were all looking at me. They were all analyzing me. They were doing, not that they were doing anything to him, but he said, I don't understand what that all is. So a lot of people in these military family scenarios, there's some connection to the military connection to the UFOs. And that's one of the things that Stan, I think, he's never come out and said it. His dad was in the military. We asked his father if he would talk to us, and he was very close, but then kind of stepped back. But there could be more to the story if we found out more about what that past connection is. But if you were to talk to Stan and Lisa and ask honestly, what's your connection to being in this situation that you're in, is that they strongly believe that they were chosen before this lifetime to be on this path, this journey together. And whether or not that was chosen by, aliens or chosen through spirit or whatever that might be, but was their intention to be on this journey. There's a great quote in the film from Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who does hypnotherapy and works with a lot of abductees and experiencers. And he said that he asked Stan once, do you think of yourself as a messenger? And he says, no, I don't. He goes, all I'm trying to do is share things based on by me sharing, it helps me understand it. It helps me, grasp what it could be. And he said, so you don't think you're a messenger? He goes, no. He says, well, in the same way, he says, when I was a little kid, this is Leo talking, when I was a little kid, I used to deliver the newspapers. He says, I didn't know the writers. I didn't know the editors. I didn't know the publisher. But I delivered the newspapers. I was a messenger. Stan's a messenger. He doesn't have to know the whys. He's just delivering a message that will help people, recognize the fact. And as Stan said, it's really simple. The message is, the sooner we accept the fact that we're not alone, the sooner things will change. The sooner we will ascend to whatever this next level of consciousness that we're supposed to be in. And the ramifications. What are the ramifications? Think about the geopolitical ramifications if we're a galactic, just one small factor in a galactic federation, and what happens to the economy, and what happens to all the power brokers and the control of money, and those are the type of things that when you start to really look at what the impact could be, it's a little bit daunting, but you have to start somewhere. And I think that over the last 20 years in particular, there's been a lot more exposure. The information age is making it much more accessible for people to find the things that are out there. And that one of the things that I should mention is that I really, I'm aware of what has happened from a global perspective when there's big stories out there, but I haven't done the deep dive. I hadn't done the deep dive before I got involved in this story. And when I started to do that after I read Stan's book, and there were things that were presented in there, names that I had never heard of before, so I had to go start doing this research to have a framework, the solid foundation of where Stan's stories come from. And I spent a lot of time on Project Camelot, reading and also watching a lot of videos that of the interviews that were on there, and I learned a ton. And as I kept going down those rabbit holes based on what I was learning, there's plenty of information out there. It's if people take the time to do those deep dives and to read about the corroborative stories that are opposite ends of the earth, exact same things are happening. It's pretty amazing to know that there's that much information that's available, yet we're still not to a point culturally where we're willing to accept this as on the whole as being a reality.
Well, and again, it's kind of like my voyage here, John. It's about giving them, it's about being open-minded and let people ask the what-if question. Yeah, some people think we're crazy for doing this. I mean, we've been doing this show for almost 4 years. And I feel that's kind of my, I don't know about an alien calling, but I feel that it's my calling in life to do this. Before we go on with more questions, people, if they want to get your film, if our listeners want to get your film, how do they go about doing that? Because it's kind of distributed through a little different channel.
Yeah, well, that was one of the things that when we were, trying to land a traditional distribution deal, when Stan's legal issues came about, kind of shut that door. So we said, okay, what's the next best way to do this? And we wanted to distribute it, but as I mentioned earlier, we wanted it to be something that would continue the conversation, keep the dialogue going. So we developed the concept for the altpov.tv, so altpov.tv is a website. And the intention of the website is not just for the distribution of Stan's film, but to disseminate information about alternative points of view. That's the name of the website. So it's not just about ufology or ufology. It will also be about paranormal and conspiracy theory, and it could even be about things that are happening in the world that are fringe in the sense that people aren't aware of it, and creating storytelling that will bring it to a larger audience. So the site launched in mid-May. So it's only a month and a half old. We're slowly gaining momentum, and our objective is to, through being on shows like this and talking about it, is get people to go to the website, see what's there, follow along all the different social media that we're plugged into, Google+, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, YouTube. plus the website. So the website right now is an opportunity for people to go and either purchase a DVD or watch a video on demand of the film. They become a member of the site, and then they can have access to the film. Down the road, membership will have additional benefits. Members will be able to upload their own content and videos and images, and we'll have a member portal that allows them to do that. Eventually, we'll have the ability for chat, potentially, and forums. It's something that we also see it as an opportunity based on the journey that we've been on for other filmmakers who are looking to find a home, an audience for their film. So, as I mentioned, we've only been a month and a half, and we have almost 1,000 members on our site. So where are we going to be in 6 months, a year, 2 years from now? Hopefully in the tens of thousands, and it would be awesome to be able to say to an independent filmmaker on a fringe subject to say, would you like to have an audience of tens of thousands of people potentially see your film? So one of our goals, based on the journey that we've been on, is to provide that channel, that pathway to audiences who are interested in that content. So we have the grand vision of seeing other filmmakers find a home on this website, of hosting online film festivals that will allow people to connect to the content in a big way. So we're starting out slow with Stan's story. We have more content that we're going to put on the site that's specific to Stan's story. In particular, one of the things that we did was we filmed a regression. It's about 2.5 hours long, and we'll have that up on the website probably later this summer. So we'll have more content. There's tons of little stories that we'll be able to put out onto the website over the course of the next several months, and we're looking forward to being a portal and an education resource for people who are interested in the subject matter. So the film is available at altpov.tv, and I encourage people to follow along on Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr as well.
And can they also get it through your J3 Film site as well, John?
No, the J3 Film site is a production company, and we've kept the two separated primarily because the J3 Films, we may be doing films, and we will be doing films down the road that have nothing to do with paranormal or ufology or things of that nature. We have a couple of things that we're looking at that are completely unrelated, and we just want to keep the two entities kind of separate. One is more a production company. The other one is more of a distribution channel for content.
Okay. Well, I mean, I would love to see your TV channel. I mean, a place where all this stuff can come together. And I'm working with a couple of young filmmaker, actually two of them. We've had them on the show a couple of times that are they're out filming right now, taking paranormal investigations from a different standpoint. The guy is a musician, unbelievable musician, writes his own stuff, performs his own stuff, does unbelievable videos and stuff like that, and he's putting stuff together, I think, that's better than Ghost Adventures or any of this other reality stuff we're seeing. But just like you said, trying to get a break, trying to get his foot in the door, or even get a few bucks. These guys are starting to realize doing it on their own. They're like, well, we'll go shoot 12 episodes. Well, they shot one episode, and it cost them a fortune, and they did all the work themselves.
Well, here's the beauty of what we're doing, and if you look at the content world right now, you look at the experience. I was listening to one of your shows, the filmmaker that did the Brown Mountain. North Carolina, and he was talking about it costs the same amount of money to go and see Paranormal Experience that was made for $15,000 as it is to see Avatar, which was made for $250 million, which is true. But what's happening in the world of content right now, and the younger generations have embraced this, and one of the things that we're kind of surprised by is that so far the audience, according to our Google Analytics, is trending young. I was expecting kind of the 30 to 40 demographic to be our sweet spot. It's the 18 to 34, which is where we have our biggest numbers, huge numbers. It's 60% of our audience falls into that category, which I was really, really surprised by. But these are the people who are consuming content. The younger generations are looking for content on handheld devices, on the internet. They're not looking for traditional channels. And you'll see more and more films now that are independent films or small distribution company films that are being released theatrically at the same time that they're available as video on demand, which is very unusual. When you think about the traditional model, it was all about being released in a theater first. And you go back. I was reading a great article about Jaws and how Jaws kind of changed the game. It was the very first blockbuster film, and the way that films used to be released back in before Jaws came out was they used to be released in small releases. So they would be released in New York, L.A., and Chicago, and if they got an audience, then they would slowly expand across the United States. And it could take months before it got to a small town, a release that was a brand new film, until Spielberg's came out, and it went to a whopping 400-plus theaters, which was unheard of at the time. And now we're talking about films that are released in the 4,000 screens on a release. So the whole idea, just going back 30, 40 years, is that it's changed, and it's changing again. So people are looking for content that they're interested in, as opposed to what the film or the distribution companies want them to see. So they're seeking out that type of content. And I talked to some people, and I'd love to talk to the folks that and that you've been working with about that whole idea of, well, what if we can find a way to do it and deliver it in a raw format, not in a low production quality, but in a raw, gritty format that allows people to consume it as they want to. And a lot of it is about information. There's one person who's very well known internationally in ufology. I'm not going to mention her name, but she's very well known, and she has tons and tons of content that she has captured over the years, but it doesn't live anywhere. And I've said to her, one of the things that we can do on this portal is we can take this content that you've captured over the last decade, and we can say, okay, since these are great stories, why don't we just put together, an annual series, and it'll be like they're doing on Netflix. We'll put 12 of them together and put them all out at one time. And all it's going to take is to have you introduce it, you wrap it up, and then you just have the interviews, because people want information. Right. So these are the type of opportunities to say, okay, here, now you can see this series, on this website, and we charge, a couple of bucks to see each episode, and people are going to consume that. People are preconditioned now to spend $5 or $6 online to watch a film. It's convenient.
Well, and I think that, it's kind of delving a little bit into the world of the independent filmmaker, John. There's a lot of technology out there. I know there's kind of the tried and true in the blue filmmakers that, not that many years ago had to go out. They spent tens upon tens of thousands of dollars for camera equipment. Now you can take a $200-300 a tablet with an unbelievable movie camera built into it and shoot a film that actually looks pretty doggone good with a free editor, with an editor type app. And I know while that disturbs some of the old timers, if you will, or the people that have been in it for a while, I still think it's a good thing, because it's letting talented people move forward. And like on YouTube, there's now series on YouTube. I mean, people are making, things are changing, and again, it doesn't have to come through Warner Brothers or Paramount. I mean, the big buck pictures are cool, but there's so much raw talent out there that will never make it to the big screen on a Paramount film, but yet could be just as good done on the small screen or on your computer right in front of you.
Well, and what I think is happening, too, is if you look at the music industry and what's happened as a result of primarily Apple and iPod and iTunes, the availability of content, and, it's being available in Napster, creating the opportunity for people to basically consume music whenever they want it and find it whenever they want it. So it would, go back a dozen years ago, and the way that musicians made money was selling CDs and albums. That was how they made their money. Now that's not how they make their money. They make their money by touring.
Right.
Because it's almost like give the music away for free and come and see us play live, and that's why we're charging, $75 and $40 for a T-shirt, because that's where they're making their money. the same thing is starting to happen where you see the big blockbuster films and the mega superstars who are bankable. They're not as bankable as they used to be. There's really no mega superstar in the way that there used to be. And I think one of the reasons why is because people are accessing film in a way that they never have before. The numbers are still big because the cost of ticket prices continue to go up. And one of the things that if you look at the numbers in box office enough to say, okay, if a film is coming out in 3D and they're charging $15 to watch that 3D film, a big portion of the box office gate is coming from a higher ticket price. If you go just based on the number of people attending a film, the numbers are lower now than they used to be because people are consuming content on their handhelds, on their tablets, and on their personal computers versus always going to the theater. So there is a shift. So I think that there, for filmmakers who are recognizing, or storytellers who are recognizing that there is an audience out there that is completely content sitting in their sweatpants and a T-shirt on a Saturday night and consuming a film versus, driving to the theater and spending $40 for tickets and food. They're content to consume it, And I never thought that I would see people watching movies on a smartphone.
Right.
But I see it all the time now. It just blows my mind. To me, a movie is to be experienced in a big theater. That's my mindset, is that there's certain films I want that theater experience. But people are now consuming them in ways that we never thought that they would, and they're willing to spend, $4 or $5 on a digital download to watch it on their phone.
Yeah, it's amazing, man.
It is. It's a shift, and it's going to be interesting to see where it's going to be in the next 5 years. I just love the idea of younger people who are more technically grown up in more of a technical world. They don't think twice about learning a new computer program when they're 12, 13 years old. So you have musicians who are making their own music when they're teenagers and making films when they're teenagers that would have never had the access to those tools 20 years ago because they just didn't exist. They weren't consumable. They were big-ticket expenses. Now anybody can do it. And that doesn't make everybody a filmmaker or a musician or a storyteller, but if they do it and they learn the craft and they learn how to tell a story and they're presenting content that people want to see, then you're going to see more and more independent films be distributed through channels like this versus traditional distributors. And the other thing a big part about that is that you spend all your money to make something, and then you get to the traditional distribution, it's an 80-20 split in favor of the distributor. Right. And then it's usually a net deal, so net profit. So they could bury costs for years and you won't see a penny until, 4 or 5 years down the road when they finally say that it's broke even and now anything that comes in, there's money there. I've talked with people who had films in Hollywood that have they weren't huge budget films. They were, $500,000 to $1 million films. But once they got to the distribution channel, they haven't seen a penny.
Exactly.
And it's in the favor of it's always been in the favor of the distributor. There's new models coming out now where you have to, if you're willing to take on a little bit more of the promotion of the film, it could be a 50-50 split, but then you're also putting more money into it up front. So it's the traditional route is an expensive one. So for the gonzo filmmaker and the ones who have great stories to tell, I think it could be a great resource to have portals like altpov.tv as a distribution point. Because the beauty of that is that over time we're going to have the tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of followers. And when you have filmmakers that make a film, we can just say to them, here, we have 10,000 people, we have 50,000, we have 200,000 people. They will be interested in your story. Are you interested in having it distributed through us? And create a win-win for the filmmaker, because if you try to do it on your own, it's very hard. Yeah. As people will learn if they go through we have people telling us, well, just put it out on YouTube for free and you make a ton of money. Well, that's not how YouTube works. Right. People are like, well, there's people making so much money. It's the value is there, but they're not necessarily recognized as money. And you're talking about, people with hundreds of millions of hits that are making money. They're valued and making money. So this is more about a channel that provides people an opportunity for focused content that has an altruistic intention behind it. I don't want an advanced My vision for this was never to advance an agenda. It was to present an alternative in a way that gets the masses to think about, I wonder what if this is true? What if there's something here? As opposed to someone making a film, whether it's on the right or the left, to say that it's an extreme agenda and they're trying to force that agenda to their audience. I'm not interested in that type of content. We want content that's going to help people raise their level of awareness to the point where they can make decisions that could have an impact on where we go as humanity.
Well, and I think the other thing is if you can put more, with your new project here, the more fringy stuff, the more alternative stuff, the more different stuff you can put out there, you'll draw the crowd. I mean, the crowd. You build it and they will come. I mean, people are really drawn to this. A couple questions that came in. Let me run a couple by, if you don't mind switching back a bit to Stan's thing. It says, during the making of the documentary, the witnesses mentioned, including Alejandro Rojas, how they were blown away by a photo that Stan had taken of a hybrid, but before he could get it logged into his PC, the photo vanished. Did you, John, see that photo yourself?
No, I did not. That happened before we got involved in his case. I think it was probably only 6 months prior to that, if that much. But there was I think 17 people that were at his house the night that happened, and all 17 of the people at that event saw the image, and each one of them, the people that were, Alejandro was there, Stan and Lisa, obviously. And Claude, who's also, so Alejandro and Claude were both in the film, and Claude, even though we didn't put this in the film, when I talked to him about it and we interviewed him, he said it was a very emotional, and Rick Nelson was also there, who was in the film. It was it was one of those films, or one of those images that when you see it, it's an emotional event. And Claude said he was brought to tears when he saw it, because he was like, this is profound. And then in a matter of minutes, when Stan walked downstairs to go and load it on his computer, his camera beeped and the image was gone. But the people saw the people saw it.
Yeah. Well, I've had the opportunity to interview a lot of very respected ufologists. Grant Cameron being one of them. Actually, here he's been in the studio a couple of times and met him in person, and I really respect Grant. And we talked a little bit about Stan, and he just said, and Grant is so matter of fact, but he's just like, there is just so much strange stuff that happens around this guy. You just cannot believe it, and people won't believe it unless they're right there with him.
Right.
And
I agree.
And these.
That's why I wish he could invite people. I mean, the greatest skeptics in the world and debunkers to spend a week with him. And I understand that there's some pretense that would come with that, is that, oh, he's putting on airs. But we spent time with him, that 10-day period that we were we poured over every piece of evidence. I watched every video that he had. I watched all of his regressions. And while I was there one night, it was probably 1 o'clock in the morning, and Stan said, I really hate watching and he would get up when we were watching the regressions. He says, because I don't remember. And he goes, and that doesn't sound like me. It doesn't look like me. He says, it kind of weirds me out. And he said, now after you've seen all this, he goes, do you think I'm crazy? And this was a really raw, vulnerable moment. He was saying, do you think I'm nuts? And I said, Stan, based on what I've seen here, I said, it's profound in the sense that there's so much of it. So do I think you're nuts? No, I don't. And he said, well, there's times, and he goes, I'm sure you could understand why. He says that I feel like I don't know if my life is real. Is it not real? Should I believe everything that's happened? He says it's just very confusing at times. And he even said, and he got emotional too. And he said, and I have to admit that it still scares me. It scares me in the sense that I don't understand why this is all happening, why it's happened to me, why it continues to happen, and why I'm the person that was chosen for whatever reason. But I'll also say at the same time, there's hundreds of people just like me out there, all over the world that are doing the same thing. And we had a chance to interview. One of the things we do on altpov.tv is we have a radio we call allpov.radio. It's a podcast, and one of the first person we interviewed was Peter Maxwell Slattery, who's from Australia and has had very similar experiences to Stan. I've watched Peter's regression video, and what happens in his regression video is identical, and I'm not kidding, identical to what happens with Stan, as far as being channeled and the way that his head moves, the way that he talks, the way information is digested and shared, and there's the struggle to communicate. It is identical. It's scarily identical that here we are, opposite ends of the world, same type of experiences happening. So there's hundreds of people out there that are having similar experiences, and hopefully, with films like this and other films out there, that I think this film is just as important for people who are on the journey for awareness and want to know more and are opening their eyes as a result of seeing something like this. But I also think it's just as important for experiences to see this, the ones who don't want to talk about it, who aren't comfortable sharing the way that Stan has. And when they see a movie like this, it validates their experiences. They feel better that they're not crazy. So we've had a handful of people who have echoed that to us as thank you so much for making this film. It has made my life more easier to comprehend that, I'm not alone. Right. And I've had 2 or 3 people who said, I want to talk to you, but I don't want to share my story. Because they're feeling like I now have a voice, I now have a channel to talk about this in ways that I never could before. And I wasn't expecting that when we made the film, but I now realize that there is a significant opportunity here for people to watch this film and say, I'm normal, I'm like Stan, I'm not crazy, I feel better, right, knowing that I'm not alone in having experiences like this.
Do you know, and we don't need to get into it too much, but is with his legal stuff, does it look like he's going to come out okay on this deal, or is it pending? Or
well, I was surprised, just like everybody else, and it was specifically difficult for us because he had the search warrant was April of last year. And we didn't know anything about it. They didn't share it. And rightfully so, they didn't, because they were instructed by their attorney, why would you want to start talking about something until you're charged? Don't even bring it up. Don't talk to anybody about this, because otherwise, if you start to talk about it, you're propagating a story that has no value yet because you haven't been charged anything. So don't bring a negative to you until it's brought to you. So I understand why, but when I heard about it, I called up Lisa right away. I saw something on Facebook. She didn't say what it was, but she said, when you see this, you'll understand. You'll have a better idea that this is not true. So I went and looked, and I saw the story, and my heart sank. And it was primarily, selfishly, that the timing couldn't have been worse because of all the work that we had done to get the film to a point where we were going to hopefully find a fit in Hollywood. But at the same time, I realized that it's more about the message, and how the message gets out there is the most important thing. So when I had the first conversation with Lisa, and Stan, and they both apologized that they couldn't share anything with us, and I understood why once they shared, what their attorneys had said to them. But in talking with both of them, Stan had said, absolutely, positively, under no circumstances whatsoever will I cop any sort of plea deal. He said, I am not guilty. I am not going to do anything that will give anybody the benefit of saying that they broke me, or he says, I didn't do this. I am not guilty. So he is adamant, and I've spoken to him only 2 or 3 times since it's happened, and every time I've talked to him, he said the same thing. And I've even asked him, because it was right around the time that we were launching the film, he was supposed to have a court appearance, and I said, Stan, there's not going to be any surprises, are there?
Right,
he said,
right.
No, there's no surprises, John. He goes, I will not admit guilt for something that I didn't do. He goes, we will take this as far as we humanly can, and he said, I'll bring my whole story into the courtroom, because I will validate that I've been monitored, and I have the evidence, I have the reports, he documents everything. So that from that point of view, what he's sharing with me, both he and Lisa, is that they're in it for the long haul. They're going to fight this as tooth and nail, and he will not admit guilt because he believes strongly that he was set up.
Yeah. I hope for his sake and his family and I mean, again, people can get caught up in it, and it was kind of again the bunkers, the anti-Stan people. When that hit, it hit with a vengeance. It was like yes, but I and who knows at the end of the day? I guess everybody has to dig through everything and find out what's really what. But a horrific thing to have happen to any of us. Something.
Well, we had to address it in the film because of the timing of it, and we didn't recut the film. There was actually a conversation at one point because the advisors that we had said your only opportunity to get the film out is to recut it and address that the government's out to get them. The conspiracy theory approach is that, and then kind of focus on, we focused on from 2000 till 2012, and this would flip the story to present day, and then reflecting back on how we got to present day. And I just felt like it's a whole different story. I said, what happened between 2000 and 2012 is still valid, regardless of the situation that's going on with Stan today. So I think it's still important to tell the story. Whether he's guilty or innocent, what happened to him, and it's still a valid documentation of those experiences and the evidence that he's documented over the years. So I think it's what's happening now is another story. It's another part of his journey that if someone really wanted to dig deep and do an investigative thing, they may wind up in a ditch somewhere, but it's a whole different story. And I didn't think it served the purpose of trying to reach a wide audience to open people's eyes about the experiences versus making it into a conspiracy theory type of story. So we walked away from that, didn't want to do that, and that kind of sealed our fate to self-distribution of the film.
Very true, very true. Any other projects coming up for you, John, in the not-too-distant future?
Well, we're spending. It's another learning lesson too. Is to launch a expansive website to distribute a film through is a big endeavor because we're not just looking at it as a distribution point like most films do, but it's taken up a lot of time and learned an awful lot about integration in PayPal, which can be very evil in its integration. Not that they're evil people, but the process is evil to try to get it to the point where it works the way that you want it to. So we've had a lot of learning lessons there. But there are a couple of other things. I mean, I've got tons of ideas for other documentary films, and I'll even mention one now that may ruffle some feathers. But I would love to do a film between now and the next general election that focuses on the whole issue of the founding fathers in our Christian beliefs, and that this country was built on Christian beliefs. I've done the research, and there's plenty of research out there that indicates that is the furthest thing from the truth, but yet it's a story that continually is brought to the attention of extreme right-wing people, is that we are a Christian nation. And all you have to do is look at the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution to realize that was never the intention. That we were a free country, and we have different. And it's not meant to be an attack. It wouldn't be presented as an attack. It would be presented as an education that's not necessarily true. So that's one of the projects that's kind of percolating on the front burner that we're looking into, but. Right now, I would say probably 90% of our energy goes into getting the word out that this film is available, because we really feel that more and more people see this, more and more conversations happen, and awareness goes to a whole new level.
Well, I wish you the best success, and again, I want to thank you so much for being here. Why don't you throw out the website one more time, John, and so our listeners can go ahead and take a look at this film.
Sure. It's POV.TV, and on that website we have not only we have some clips from other things, we have the radio broadcasts and podcasts that can be downloaded. The film is available for DVD purchase or video on demand. It's a 48-hour rental. You can watch it as many times as you want in 48 hours. What we're going to expand the site to turn it into a community and create an opportunity for people to raise their level of awareness if they so choose. And that's the beauty of it too, is that the story of Stan's regressions and where that goes and the information that's shared is pretty intense. And we didn't feel it was right to really include too much of that in the film, because it would be like going from basic arithmetic to algebra to calculus in 48 hours. And we want to appeal to the center, let them consume it, understand it, do their own research, and what comes up next on the website could be something that they're interested in diving a little bit deeper. So our intention is to continue the story, share more information on a variety of different levels to continue the expansion and education process for people who choose to. So we're excited about where it could go.
Sounds good. John, thank you so much again. Have a great weekend. Take care, and happy 4th of July next weekend. We'll stay in touch.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you having me on the show.
It was an honor having you here, John. Take care.
Okay, thanks a lot. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.